You know, it's fascinating, Andrew, that the Democrats are now speaking about passing border security. I don't even think it's the issue now whether it will pass or not. It is obvious that it is an Achilles heel for President Biden, and they're trying to do everything to provide him cover. And what is so just sad about all this is that it's not about the people whose lives have been impacted by this invasion. You have no idea where these terrorist cells are. You have no idea where they may launch themselves. It may be on election day. It's not as if they're doing it for the security of the people. They just want to take the blame away from Biden and put it on Republicans for the election year.
Yeah, there's a common thread through this, whether it's foreign policy or the border. One of the keys to effective foreign policy is you have to be coherent and you got to be consistent. Coherent and consistent. Some of that's hard for us because of our system. We change presidents every 4 to 8 years. We change all of Congress every 2 years, a third of the Senate every 2 years. So some of that's baked into the cake. But then when you have unsteady leadership at the presidential level, those things get exasperated. So foreign policy is a mess because it's not coherent and it's not consistent. And when you're talking about the border policy, we're not coherent, we're not consistent. And the people that really get screwed on this is the people that are trying to come into the country both legally and illegally because they don't know which way's up. People get taken advantage of. There's this whole subgenre of our political establishment now that's built for and against the border, which kind of keeps it as this incalcitrant issue where it never gets settled because a lot of people don't want it to get settled because they wouldn't have anything to do. And then you put inconsistent leadership on top of it, you got a big hot mess. So whether it's foreign policy or the border, it all starts with inconsistent, incoherent leadership. It doesn't matter who's in the White House. In this case, it's Biden. When you don't have a consistent message on it, when the optics don't match what you're saying, when people can see what's happening in real time and understand that this is a leadership problem, you've got a big, big issue. And you'd think they want to do something to try to fix it, but they apparently don't. And it's fair to ask that question, why they don't. It goes back to that other thing. Do you really want to solve this problem? Because the evidence says it doesn't look like people really want to solve this problem or even make a dent in it.
Andrew?
I know it when I see it. It was also the Supreme Court standard for obscenity. So if we're going to apply that to foreign policy, it really is pretty obscene. I remember Iraq. I was there twice for 2 long tours and a bunch of down and back stuff, too. It was a mess, and I don't just mean the warfare. I mean behind the scenes, the money that the contractors were running through, the fraud, waste, and abuse. That stuff all happened, and we don't talk about it, and there was no reckoning on it. And then we just transferred it up to Afghanistan. Same problem again, just went a whole lot longer until it finally collapsed in on itself and we botched the exit on top of it. We don't want to learn the lessons that are right in front of us. We use the example of Putin. Well, we don't have a plan in Ukraine because we didn't have a plan in Georgia, and we didn't have a plan in Chechnya, and we didn't have a plan when he went into the Crimea the first time. We know who Vladimir Putin is. Nobody ever had a plan. We just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, thinking you're going to throw money at it, it's going to solve the problem. You talk about the border. We're going to spend a bunch of money. We're going to have a lot of wailing and gnashing of the teeth. Nothing's going to get done because we don't want to learn the mistakes of the past of what we're doing. We seem to have this thing right now in foreign policy and domestic policy where we just don't want to have the pain involved of ripping a Band-Aid off and going, okay, we have this festering wound. We should put a little antiseptic on it that's going to burn and hurt real bad for a few minutes, but it'll heal and close the wound, and it might leave a scar and it might cause more problems down the line, but at least it would stop seeping and leaking and bleeding. We got a couple of these things like the border, like foreign policy, that's just seeping and leaking our country right now. And we need to have a sense of urgency to try to at least do something to stop the bleeding on these issues.
I want to talk about something that did not get the attention that it needed. I'm going to go to my man, Andrew. Yeah. I try to keep my biases out of media. But let's admit it, we're all biased. I just admit mine, okay? I'm not a hypocrite about it. And I must tell you, when Harrison Buckner spoke at that commencement address, and let me say this, it was a Catholic school, okay? He was speaking to a Catholic school. And while some in the media wanted his remarks to be sexist and homophobic, they rarely mentioned where he was speaking. But let me tell you what made me so proud, because it was a lesson in civics education, Andrew. It's when Patrick McHolmes and Andy Reid, Patrick Holmes, who knows them better because they work together, and he said, listen, isn't this America? Isn't what it's about that people can celebrate their freedom of speech and expression, and we can listen to them and not agree with them? He said, but let me just tell you, I don't judge Harrison Buckner by his speech on that day. I know him to be a good man, a God-fearing man, a man that I trust, that I respect, and I honor. And while I may not disagree with everything he said at that commencement address, I defend his right to say it. That represents who we are as Americans. Because you know why I'm so, do you hear my enthusiasm? Why? Because the media, because remember, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid waited before making any statement about Buckner's remarks. And the media wanted to do this to further malign Buckner, to cancel him, but they said, not on our team, not in our locker room. We make that decision, and all of a sudden, it just dies away. Andrew.
First of all, I'd submit anybody that spends 2 to 3 weeks on what a kicker said at a commencement address, you're just not doing your life correctly in the first place with your news intake. 'Cause just think about that in the aggregate. That's kind of a silly thing, right? This really didn't have anything to do with Buckner. It had everything to do with this all slotted into the buzzwords and the SEO of how media, especially online media, works now is, oh, somebody said something that slots into what we can get engagement on. Let's grab it and go with it. Yeah, it was Catholic. I'm not Catholic. I'm Baptist. The Donaldsons that spell the name differently that are our cousins up in Youngstown, they're all Catholic. We get along fine other than occasional disagreement. This didn't have anything to do with the Catholic side either. This is all 100%, oh, he said something we disagree with and we can slot it into our engagement. And that's what they did, and they ran with it. He was the social media character of the day for a couple of days. Certain outlets grabbed it and pushed it. At some point, we should step back and learn that, like, wait a minute, it's going to be somebody other than Buckner next week, and it'll be somebody else the next week. There's always going to be that social media character of the day because it fits right in. And we'll just realize, like, wait a minute, it doesn't really matter what they're saying about it because they're saying the same thing over and over again just because it slots into what they want to push. And then you get into people defending each other. No, it's a dumb cycle to get into, first of all. And second of all, he had a right to say it. It was a private college. It's not like, it was taxpayer money. I guess you could make that. But even with that argument, there's lots of Looney Tunes to give Looney Tune commencement. There was hundreds of them all over the country. If we went through all of them, we'd find all kinds of craziness. It's all silly. It's all just cancel culture, if you want to use that term. But really what it is it slots into the monetizing. I need to go back to college to learn how to say it. The monetizing way media works now is you can grab that, make him a villain or a hero, and make a lot of money off it. And that's exactly what happened.
We're all appealing to get to heaven. But there's another appeal to heaven, and it involves Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito and these symbols that were discovered at his beachfront home. Andrew Donaldson, why has this become such an outrage?
We're bored. There's a couple things to this. The Supreme Court is always going to be a hot button issue for a lot of reasons because it's one of those things. Look, I've been doing online writing for a while. One of the biggest pushes of engagement is the Supreme Court. It really gets people fired up. And one of the reasons it gets people fired up in perpetuality is because you can't really do anything about it except wail and gnash teeth over it because they have lifetime appointments. There's two flag issues here. The flag with the appeal to heaven flag is a little ridiculous. Just because people on January 6th use it or because white supremacists use it or some wackadoo in Wackadooville uses a symbol that goes literally directly to George Washington and his idea for a flag in lieu of not having a national flag just quite yet for the cause of the revolution. Yeah, that one's a little silly and you're over applying it. The upside down flag, that's a little harder to explain. This is all a lot of noise and a lot of how to apply in the future because, again, we're not going to be able to do anything about this. They all got lifetime appointments and they're done on the court when they say they're done unless you're going to impeach them, which probably isn't going to happen. What we're going to have to watch going forward with things like Justice Alito's wife and houses and beach house and flags and the stuff surrounding Justice Thomas is the next time we have a hearing for a Supreme Court opening, it is going to be open season on spouses, partners, or whatever the case may be. And when you have more wailing and gnashing of teeth over that circus that's going to be coming, just remember it came from this particular circus, and these justices are probably going to have themselves to blame on it for not keeping their own houses in order. Look, if you're one of 9 of the most important people in the country, you got to keep your house in order. The one's a little silly. The other one has a lot more answering to do, but you're not going to get an answer from a lifetime appointment, and it's going to play out and make it even uglier next time we try to put a Supreme Court justice on the bench.
Andrew Donaldson, why is gender affirming becoming such a huge issue in the political calculus in this election year?
Sorry, that was my fault. My home state of West Virginia just had its primary, and the governor's race, every third or fourth commercial on TV for months and months was on that specific issue alone. And there's plenty of other issues in West Virginia, I assure you. It's a very small percentage of the population that's dealing with, but it's that much of a hot button issue, and it's gaining a lot of national money, and it's starting to seep into a lot to local. It hits a lot of primal things, and the most primal thing is you're talking about people's children. So anytime you have an issue that's like, this is somebody messing with children and or our children, and if you're a parent, all children in news suddenly becomes your child because you just project that onto you, becomes this very, very primal thing that's crossing a lot of cultural streams, and it hits a lot of buttons all at the same time. So you have a real kind of toxic mix here where you have something that on its own face would be a delicate and rather private matter for folks, but then you have people trying to nationalize it as a political movement, trying to use it as a cultural movement, trying to use it as a rights movement. And then it gets really, really ugly in a hurry because it hits people in their homes, with their children, in schools. You mess with people's kids, they get really, really touchy in a hurry. And you're starting to see that. And when you start pouring millions and millions of dollars into it as a political advertising, you see the hot mess we're getting now.